Well, hello again, guys. This time not from the streets of Athens, but the ruins of Athens. Yes, for the second of my on-the-road Newcastle United Q&A. Thank you so much for all of you who've sent your questions in. Now, well, you've just seen it there. The Greek god of thunder and lightning is about to unleash her wrath. So, yeah, let's get going. Well, as you can probably see, I've got a little bit of a sweat on here. It was a hell of a climb up here from the old town to the Acropolis. So please forgive me if we finish this video on the way back down the hill with a mythos in a cafe somewhere. Yeah, they're welcome to join me. But no, straight into the questions. And the first one was from Phil Armour, who said, has overperformance led to inflated expectations? Yes, absolutely. I've always said this. The job Eddie Howe did in taking the team from 19th to 4th in just 19 months, especially to the backdrop of new ownership, led to this illusion, this idea, a myth, if you like, Greek mythology, that Newcastle were a super club here to stay, powered by Saudi money, and it was the arrival, and they weren't going to go anywhere. The job that Eddie Howe did, and the job that his staff did as well, and taking those players on that journey, was always underplayed. It was quite incredible. And to answer Phil's question, has it led to increased expectations? Yes, I think it has, and that is something they're aware of on the inside, Eddie and his staff and players, and now, by extension, the hierarchy as well, that the job they did as a collective, as a club, probably didn't really get the credit it deserved. Yes, there was money spent, but they spent it well. Just because you're buying players doesn't mean you have to buy good ones. Newcastle have seen that with one or two that they've brought in, but on the whole, they got that recruitment right, allied to absolutely incredible coaching, you know, the Greek god of coaching, Eddie Howe, if you like, and we're seeing it now with Lewis Hall here last night making his England debut. No one's actually asked a question about Lewis Hall, so I'll throw in one myself. A player who a year ago was hooked in 3 of his first 4 starts, then didn't start a game for another 5 months, to make his England debut here last night and to come on and look so assured, aggressive when he had to be, progressive, forward, quick passes. That is because of the job Eddie Howe has done. And I wrote this for the Daily Mail yesterday. There was an occasion last year when Lewis Hall turned around to those close to him and said, all this extra work they're doing with me, do they think I'm shit, was his words. And those close to him said, no, it's because they think he could be brilliant. That is why they put in the extra work after training, the extra analysis sessions, and wow, what a job they've done. And what we're seeing now is an England international. So to go back to Phil's question, yes, it has led to inflated expectations, but I do believe now, given the events of the past year, with regards to PSR and that difficulty in spending money, we are seeing now, even beyond the region, and whenever I'm here with my England colleagues, you know, they ask me what's going on at PIF, still interested, where are Newcastle going from here? And I explain everything I've said here to them. So I do think there is now a wider acceptance that, yeah, Newcastle really don't have any right to be in that top 4 right now. Now, Mark Doyle asks, are the club likely to peddle the January is a difficult month line when we go into the new year transfer window? Now, January is a difficult month, but it's difficult for different reasons. Now, the historical idea of January being hard to trade was that because it was halfway through a season, teams didn't want to sell and you had to pay inflated fees. That's not really the case anymore. It's difficult because you've got the PSR deadline coming in June and you don't want to overspend and then leave yourself having to scramble to sell players, as Newcastle did last June, even though they hadn't bought anybody in January. But the point I make is January can actually be a good month. It can be an easy month if you've got money to spend and if you identify clubs who need to sell. Look at Newcastle with Everton and Anthony Gordon. Wow, when you reflect on that deal now, £40 million for Anthony Gordon in a January window, that's the sort of deal that is out there if you can identify the team who needs it and the player who wants to leave. And that's what Newcastle did with Gordon. So if they peddle the January is difficult line, it's because they probably haven't got scope to spend and they don't want to leave themselves in a situation like they had last June where they're scrambling to sell players. If there is a little bit of headroom, January, if you're clever, Mark, can actually be a good month. Now, another question, I think this is a great one as well, it's from Andrew Ford. He says, in the past week, Joelinton has run comparison to Ray Kennedy by Jamie Carragher. Ray Kennedy, of course, Seton Delville born, went on to play for Arsenal and Liverpool. Andrew says Joelinton, though, is unique. Who would I compare him to? And I say it's a great question, because it's probably the one I've had to give most thought to. I've had to consult my friends as well. Now, the name that originally sprang to mind, and this isn't a compliment, is Rob MacDonald. Anyone younger than 30, check it out. And I'm talking to Joelinton when he first arrived at the club. Yeah, that wasn't a good comparison. Big Rob MacDonald, of course, the misfiring centre forward of late 80s infamy. But no, since then, the comparisons, well, they are rather more flattering. And I think the point Andrew makes about Joelinton being unique is absolutely true. He's got a skill set that no current player certainly has. I had to go back beyond all those who are currently playing in the Premier League and beyond to find a name that matched. And the name I'm going to go with is Julio Baptista, once of Real Madrid, and like Joelinton, a Brazil international. Certainly in terms of his size. And when you think of the nickname he had, that was the Beast. And when we asked Eddie Howe to describe Joelinton down at Nottingham Forest on Sunday after that quite incredible match-winning second-half performance there, he said he's like a beast. He's like a machine, you know. No matter where you put him on the pitch, he'll do a job for you. And it's just that physical presence, how imposing he is, how superior he is to others in that department. And as well, you know, that might be doing him down in terms of the skill he has, but certainly, I'm just trying to cross the road here, guys, yeah, certainly it is those physical attributes that sets him apart, and his ability to impact on his own team and the opposition as well. He truly is, to go back to the question, yeah, I've avoided the cars and nearly crashed into a pedestrian. He truly is. He is unique. So yeah. Now this question from Andrew Vaughan follows on quite nicely, because he says, in January, which right winger should Newcastle go for? Avoiding a motorbike. Yeah, I should probably do this on the pavement, shouldn't I? But anyway, we'll carry on. No, I think the reason it follows on quite nicely is because my answer is Joelinton. Andrew, everything I'm hearing is there probably isn't going to be the money in January for Newcastle to go and spend big on that profile of right winger they want. I know the likes of Brian and Mbeumo have been mentioned, and yes, he's got admirers on the inside out. You know, he's a good player, but I don't think there's been any discussion at all really with regards to Newcastle making a January move for Mbeumo. That's my information. So I think in the short term, certainly between now and the end of the season, given what Joelinton did from the right down at Forest on Sunday, why not explore that avenue? We thought he could only do that from the left. Well, no, as Eddie Howe said afterwards, he is adaptable, and that was probably his best 45 minutes of the season in the new position, a problem position for Newcastle. So to answer the question, just go with Joelinton for now. Now, Toon Assassin asks, who would I buy at right centre-back or right wing? I've already touched on the right wing. Yes, I've recorded this video over 2 days. Sometimes I'm in blue, sometimes I'm in, what was the colour last night? Yeah, it was green, wasn't it? But no, so I've spoken about the right wing, at the right centre-back. Now, I don't know who I would buy there, but I know the type of profile I would buy there, and that's Mark Gee. What Newcastle need is someone who's got pace to recover in behind, and that pace and that confidence to take the ball out of defence. That's why Newcastle identified him. Now, the money went far too far. I think, you know, even Eddie Howe would accept that if Newcastle were having to pay 65, 70 million pound, it probably wasn't another little flash of lightning there. It probably wasn't the best deal. But I think someone of Gee's profile, definitely that is what they need. They need more pace at the back, and they need someone who can push them up the field. As for the name, well, that's over to you, Paul Mitchell. Right, we're just walking past two guys having a bit of a row here. Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe. Don't know what they're arguing over. But anyway, next question, and this is a regular one. Just any transfer news in general heading into January. I touched on it in the previous answer, and that was, I think Newcastle are probably going to have to sell to buy in January. That's what I'm getting back so far now. Miguel Almiron is one name who's been talked about with the move to River Plate. He's a boyhood River Plate fan. I remember sitting down with Almiron a couple of years ago in Saudi Arabia, and he showed me the tattoo on his back, and it is a River Plate tattoo. That was the team he watched as a little boy with his dad in Paraguay. So that would make sense, but the money that was being spoken about previously with regards to Almiron going to Saudi and MLS and £15 million, and I just don't think that's there anymore. There'll have to be a realisation now with Almiron that they've probably missed the boat for bringing in somewhere north of £10 million, but we'll have to wait and see. But he's certainly one I think we could see movement on in January. That then might unlock a little bit of cash to go and bring in other players, but certainly as it stands now, I'm not expecting big investment in January. Gary Perkins asks, what is the priority, a right winger, a centre-back or a striker? I honestly think that depends on what state they get to January and what scope there is to do something. I've already touched on having that. I don't think there is a great deal of wiggle room right now, and they might have to sell to buy. It could depend who goes out, who is fit, who isn't, who's in form. Joelinton might have just solved the right winger problem. If Sven Botman is back come January in terms of centre-back, that might feel like less of a pressing need. If Alexander Isak is fit and scoring goals and Callum Wilson is back, striker might not. But on the flip side of all of that, Isak might be injured, Botman might not come back and might need a little bit more time. Joelinton on the right might not really work out going forward. So yeah, I think those are the three positions definitely they'll be looking at in terms of identifying options, but it's all to be determined. Can you hear that? There you go. What a view, but what a sound as well. Yeah, the crackle of air, the crackle of thunder there. Now, Chris asks, can Bruno and Tonali play together? Have we got to accept now that they can't? I think in the short term, we've got to accept that maybe they can't start together. I do believe that. Now, when they've been on the pitch, certainly down at Forest on Sunday together there, Newcastle were fantastic. Bruno and Tonali looked as if they complemented each other, and they combined, I think it was the second goal, didn't they? So, breaking from deep and playing those quick forward passes. I love quick forward passes, incisive passes. Now, yes, they can do that. They're two wonderful players. But if you look at the record and the numbers and what is best for the midfield and the functionality of it right now, well, Bruno and Tonali have only won one game in the Premier League when they've started together. And that was Sandro Tonali's debut against Aston Villa, 14, 15 months ago. So for now, I wouldn't start them. No, I do think you need in that midfield the legs of Willock and one of him or Sean Longstaff, and Bruno and Tonali perhaps are going to have to rotate. But down the line, can they start together? Well, yeah, they're too good not to, and that's on Eddie Howe to find a way to make it work. Now, here over my shoulder was one of those fish therapy places. They used to have one of them in Eldon Square, remember, until they realised that the fish were spreading disease and bugs from client to client. So I best not tell the good folk of Athens that. Now, a question from Tom Smith is there a world in which Will Osula plays Premier League games this season, i.e. can he start them? Well, there is, of course there is. He's a Newcastle player, and the two players he's got in front of him in terms of being centre forwards are injury prone. We've seen that with Callum Wilson, who will return, I'm told, for that game a week on Monday against West Ham. Alexander Isak is in the back, thankfully, in the form of his life again at the moment. 4-4, looking razor sharp, but we know that will perhaps not always last. Now, of course, Isak and Wilson were out recently, and Anthony Gordon was used as a centre forward, but that was during the early weeks and months of Will Osula, giving the job Eddie Howe and his staff do with players, and that development, it's quite incredible. Look at Lewis Hall. I'm here in Athens. Lewis Hall is in the England squad. A year ago, he went 7 games in a row as an unused substitute. So it just shows the development that Howe and his staff can bring from players when they really do get to work with them. So this season, certainly towards the back end of the year, given another 3 or 4 months of working with Will Osula, do I see a world in which he can start a Premier League game? To answer Tom's question, well, yes, I do. And that is testament to how much belief I have got, and we all should have, in Eddie and his staff. Hello, they clearly agree. Will Osula starts a Premier League game this season. Athens is unanimous. Now, I'm going to get absolutely soaked here, guys. I do hope you appreciate this. One last little look at the Acropolis as we make our way back down the hill. Now, Supi asks, will the Greek god of goalkeeper, Vlachodimos, be given a chance at Newcastle? In the short, I think no. He wasn't really brought in to challenge for the first team spot. He was brought in as a PSR accounting trick from Nottingham Forest. Newcastle had to pay the £20 million to encourage Nottingham Forest to pay the 35 for Elliot Anderson, which then satisfied that PSR deficit. Now, he's okay. He played very well at Wembley last month. He did okay last night, even though he was unfortunate with that own goal, which again, by the way, Lewis Hall started the move that led to it. So, no, I don't think he will get a chance, but has he played his way into a position now where he might just be number 2 if anything happens to Nick Pope ahead of Martin Dubravka? Maybe, yeah, listen, Martin Dubravka's future at Newcastle is far from certain. He might even go in January if Vlachodimos, that Greek god of goalkeeping, does continue to impress. I think he's done okay so far. Of course, he came on, didn't he, in the Carabao Cup and looked more than competent, even though he wasn't massively tested. He did the one thing he had to do with relative ease. So, to answer the question, Supi, in the short term, I don't think they see him as a first choice goalkeeper or someone who will develop into that. He was brought in as a needs must, but yeah, so far I think he's done okay. Now the next question was from John Ruddy, would you believe? And no, it wasn't any chance of me getting the game. It was, should we be concerned that the planned progression to a more possession-based style team hasn't really worked? I think by extension, Neil Snowden said, will fans accept that the style, the counter-attacking style, that seems to be the best way of going forward now, will they accept that at home against lesser opposition? Now, to answer Neil's question first, I don't think Newcastle have a choice in that. I think fans will accept anything that is exciting and is winning, and certainly when Newcastle are at their best on the transition, as we saw at Forest, well, wow, anyone would accept that. It was brilliant, but I don't think they'll be able to play like that at home against those lesser teams, and that is the challenge. How do you then break them down? Because as we saw against Brighton and for large parts of that Southampton game at times as well, and there's been others, at home they haven't really had that player to unlock, that number 10, who can open doors. They have been better when they do play, and I think Eddie Howe accepts this now, playing to their strengths. On the break, Forest was the blueprint for that, the goal against Arsenal as well the week before. Again, they're setting these blueprints that go back to the way they played 2 years ago. So is there concern at that? No, but it's something I've spoken about with Eddie Howe, and they have spoken about this internally. That planned progression, that evolution hasn't quite come off, but in the short term, as a manager, as a group of players, you do what you can to win games. And while they're winning games, well, that concern, no, it won't exist. But are they looking at ways to develop that game and to become a different team? Well, yes, of course they are. That is why Sandro Tonali was brought in. But for now, guys, it's fast on the break, counter-attacking football, and if it's more like Forest and more like Arsenal, well, here, let's embrace it. Right, we're going to have to get out of here. Yeah, it's getting worse. Now, Johnny Alive asks, is there any stadium update? I do wonder if the guys who built that are around, if they're up for a St James's Tyneside-based contract opportunity. It's certainly quite impressive. But no, Johnny, to answer you, we're going to walk and talk here, sorry. Johnny, to answer your question, not really, there isn't an update, and I genuinely believe now that they are telling the truth when they say a decision hasn't been reached. Now, I wrote the piece a couple of weeks ago saying that I was all for now a new stadium, moving to Leazes Park if that was possible, staying on the same site. A super club down the line needs a super stadium. Now, you think coming down the line now there needs to be something more in terms of, what do you think? I do think there needs to be more in terms of speaking to supporters to try and gauge what they would want to do. This is a huge generation club defining decision they're going to make. It will be at some point next year, might even be delayed to the summer. We'll have to wait and see on that. But no, there isn't really an update other than there's a hell of a lot of work going into it behind the scene. And the question is, stay or go? Well, this was never the plan, and I'm going to need the Greek god of hairdressing for this wig. Well, I said we would finish with a beer, which thankfully I've got, but sadly I never thought it would be here inside an airport departure lounge. Yes, the storm has forced me indoors. I've just had to have a costume change as well in the check-in queue there. So on we go, nonetheless, and Johnny Alive also asked, do I think Paul Mitchell is and will be a good department? Well, Johnny, the jury is out on that, and it's as out as a jury can be. Now, it wasn't a very good start, it wasn't a very impressive first summer on so many levels, but let's give the guy a chance, and certainly January and going into next summer as well, that will tell us more. Now, Chris Skelton on this theme as well, he asked a question, what do I think the club's transfer strategy will be? Will they try to sign first team players while lowering the age, given there are now several who are 30 plus, or will it be the likes of Tino and Lewis Hall, players who they bring in to look to develop and be in the first team, 12 months, 18 months down the line? Well, the exposure we had to Paul Mitchell, in which he said the club's transfer policy wasn't fit for purpose, and I think he was talking to all of it. He didn't think the club could continue to pay big money, the i.e. 63 million, 40, 45 million for ready-made first-team players. He also, I think, didn't believe they could spend 30 million on the likes of Lewis Hall and Tina, who could be ready down the line. So to that end, what does it leave them? Well, it probably leaves them younger players for smaller fees with that scope to develop, where it's on Paul Mitchell to identify value, then it's on Eddie Howe to extract that value. I think that is the way they're going now. But as I said, those talks for January, they haven't taken place yet, so it's all very much to be determined. B4ZE1 asks, where do I see the club in 5 years' time, and where do the club see themselves in 5 years' time? It's a good question, given all of the talk there's been of late around PIF and all the still interested. And my take on that is the stadium announcement next year will give us the biggest indicator as to where they're at with their ambition. But where do I see the club in 5 years' time? I see them either having just moved into or on the verge of movement into a new training ground and a new stadium. I think that's where they see themselves at as well. In the meantime, what they're going to have to do is to continue doing what Eddie Howe has done so far, what I've spoken about in the previous answer there, and that is identifying value in the transfer market and trying to coach on those players like they've done with Lewis Hall, like they've done with others as well, and in effect punch above their weight in the meantime, because until a new stadium arrives and until they keep on continuing to double and increase that commercial revenue, they are hamstrung, they are bound by the boundaries of PSR. So where do I see them in 5 years' time? Well, yeah, I think until then it's going to be an evolution rather than revolution. And in 5 years' time, well, yeah, if Newcastle can establish themselves as a club by then who regularly competes in European competition and gives the domestic cups a good go, well, I think that is where they're at. But I don't envisage Remember when Amanda Staveley came in and Yasser Al-Rumayyan in the documentary talking about being number one in the world and winning Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues within 5 to 10 years? I don't see that in the next 5 years, certainly not. Now, Gary Kilvington asks, when will the likes of Sandro Tonali and Harvey Barnes push for a move if they continue to be left on the bench? Well, I've said this before, Gary, and players pick teams, not managers. If Sandro Tonali and Harvey Barnes want to be happy at Newcastle and don't want to push for a move, just play better. Get yourself in the team. Now listen, Harvey Barnes came on at Forest. Fantastic, brilliant. Sandro Tonali came on as well. Did very well. That's how you get in the team, and that is how you stay at a club and you stay happy. Now, to try and answer the question, when will they push for a move if they don't get back in the team? Well, with both, there are question marks, of course they are, because they're brought in, big money buys. Harvey Barnes nearly £40 million, Sandro Tonali £52 million. They came here probably expecting to play. It hasn't really worked out like that for various reasons so far, but I would put that back both on the players and say, if you guys want to play, you guys have got to do more. But certainly their future at the club isn't absolutely guaranteed for different reasons there. Tonali, everything that's happened and the suspicion that he might just be happier being back in Milan. That has been there from day one, even before the betting ban. He needs a real run of good form and fitness and a little bit of love and everything around that to convince him and others and everyone that Sandro Tonali plus Newcastle is the right fit. I still believe we're waiting for that. Harvey Barnes, well, they've signed Harvey Barnes in a position whereby they've got Anthony Gordon, Joelinton and others as well. So Barnes might find it tough. Will he be happy with being this super sub, making this brilliant impact as that we know he can, as he's shown he can? Well, we'll have to wait and see. So we're not there quite yet. I haven't heard any rumblings of the two of them wanting to go. And in the short term, I'd say back on you guys to make yourselves starters. Shira's Boots asks, where is Anthony Gordon's head at? It's a good question. Now here last night in Athens, I thought he was very good for England. I've said he still needs to convert on those good performances with goals and assists for England, but that attacking, I use that word all the time, that intent, that incision, just to see the wingers and those Madueke on the opposite flank as well going forward. Anthony Gordon's a big part of that, and England look infinitely better for having him in the team, so I think he'll feel good for that. But where's his head at? Yeah, he came out this summer and it was difficult on a lot of levels. There was the links with Liverpool. I think his head was turned by that to a degree. There was the frustration of being with England on the back of the season of his life and only getting 6 minutes of football, quite incredibly. He came back for pre-season mentally and physically not in the best place. He then went away last month with England, only played about 60 odd minutes of football. If Gordon came back, and there was a little bit of a setback really in terms of where he was at physically, which in turn affects you mentally. But I do think now, once you come out of this international break and there's no international football until March, it gives him a real chance to get his head down and build those levels. Because he's brilliant, he's fantastic when he's in the team. Newcastle are all the better for it. So to answer the question, I wouldn't worry too much, but there is definitely better to come. And I know those on the inside as well think, well, what do you do if he's not at those levels? Do you take him out? No, you leave him in and you let him build back towards the place he was at last season. And I really think that'll come. I wouldn't worry on that score. Orlando asks, how do Newcastle bridge the gap to the top six? Well, they do it by everyone doing their job and doing it well and having that collective thinking between the hierarchy, between PIF, between the sporting director, between the chief executive, a new one coming in, of course, between Eddie Howe and the players. It needs that Newcastle United. We've seen the strength of that during the first couple of years of the takeover. I just worry that that's been lost a little bit in the summer, so they've got to get that back, and they do it by identifying value in the transfer market, by Eddie Howe's brilliant coaching, by that collective strength of a football club. We've seen it, didn't we, in the wake of the takeover, supporters coming back on board, everyone buying in to that journey, that movement going forward, and how powerful that was when you create that momentum. That's how they create it in the short term. Longer term, it's by building a new stadium, it's by getting the new training ground, it's by putting a zero on the end of those commercial deals. It's going to be slow, but they will get there. Sorry guys, I need a little drink of beer there to clear my throat. Now, finally, CYGREUK asks, are there any players Newcastle sold that I would rather they would have kept? Now, at some point during the last 6 months, a year, there's been a case where you've looked at the team and you've thought, wow, at home, sometimes against those teams, we spoke about this earlier, with that low block, how they could have done with Alan Saint-Maximin to come on and to be the wild card. Certainly recently, during the run when Newcastle couldn't score a goal and Alexander Isak was out and Chris Wood was scoring down at Forest, he looked at it and said, Chris Wood, well, he could have done a job through the middle. Now, I'm only going to pick one. There's Yankube Minte as well, who's given Newcastle problems on the right. In an ideal world, you keep him and you take a look at him. But out of all of those, I'd make a case for selling all of them. The one I do regret is Elliot Anderson. I've seen him come through since he was 15, 16 years old, and anyone who would listen, I've said that there's a real player in there, a real talent. Now, after the game on Sunday, I think there's a bit of retrofitting here, given how well Newcastle did and Elliot Anderson came on. I think he tried too hard and he didn't have a good cameo when he came on for Forest. A couple of people came back at me and said, stop talking about Elliot Anderson, don't mention him again. Well, I've been asked the question, so I'm going to mention him again, but he's the one. I just think there's a real player in there, a player who could go on to be an international, and in an ideal world, but PSR is not an ideal world, I would still have Elliot Anderson at Newcastle. Right guys, I've got a flight to catch now, so I must dash. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the questions as well. I hope I got through as many as I could. And by the way, I've opened a Blue Sky social account as well. I'll put the link in the description below. Please click through and follow on that. But in the meantime, keep on watching YouTube. It's wonderful here. Videos like this are great fun. And I'll see you again next week when we'll be looking ahead to West Ham. Okay, take care. Goodbye. But before we go, like, subscribe, comment, all the rest of it. Tell me what you think below the line. Let's try again. See you soon. Bye-bye.